Daniel Schwartz is a DC native. He works as the production manager at the Hamilton Live, which is one block from the White House. He's also a professional musician. He's played around town with a number of the artists in town and also as a children's performer. He's also a producer with Band House Gigs, which is a local production company, presenting shows over the last 12 years, featuring hundreds of area musicians at some of the best venues in town and throughout the DC area. So, listeners, I first ran into this guy when I was seeing a show at the Hamilton, and the artist was like, "Hey, you got to come meet Daniel," or Danny as he goes by. Got to come meet Danny, and I got to meet him, and he's one of those, you meet him and he's just one cool dude. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce Daniel Schwartz, known as Danny, from the Hamilton. So say hi to everybody and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey there. So tell us about Hamilton and your role at the Hamilton and what that is.
Well, I'm very fortunate to be working for the Clyde's Restaurant Group. I love these guys. I have some of the coolest bosses in the world. And as a senior in high school, when I went to school, I grew up in Bethesda. I opened Clyde's Restaurant in 2002 called Tower Oaks Lodge out in Rockville up in the woods.
Wow.
I was a server, and the GM there, when I got the job with Clyde's as the production manager 10 years later, said, "Danny is one of the greatest guys I've ever met, one of the worst servers I've ever worked with." He's still yeah.
I appreciate your honesty, dude.
Oh, yeah.
This is good. All right, okay. So not a good server.
Not a great server.
Okay.
I was very quick to change into nice clothes and start being a host so I could walk people, older people to their table. I really enjoyed, schmoozing with the customers and making sure they were happy. And it also, even when it would be downtime, I would jump in and be sort of a manager and bust tables and make sure everybody was having a good time and really get to the heart of what Clyde's customer service is all about.
Right.
And so when I was
amazing things.
So this year I'm celebrating my 11th year on the corner of 14th and F. For the 5 years prior to Hamilton opening, I worked for the National Press Club as a freelance audio engineer up on the 13th floor of the press building, caddy corner from us.
Sure.
And I was watching, I used to go into the borders that used to occupy our 37,000 square foot space. And as I saw it coming together, and there was a great article in the Washington Post interviewing our owner, our president, Tom Meyer, and he was talking about what he saw as the vision of this music venue and who he saw being down there. And I was like, man, I have to be involved. I have to do this. These are my heroes. I've taken so many of the lessons they taught me and invested in me as a server and a host. And all the jobs I've had in between, I've been like, well, this is how, in the best possible scenario, how Clyde's would do it. And so I happened to be working one day at the press club in a small conference room, maybe like this size or double this size, fit 75 people comfortably, and 125, 150 people showed up. The audio end of it, putting up a couple table mics and making sure they were on, was pretty simple. So I was running around turning down the AC, getting water, getting extra chairs, doing everything I could to be hospitable. And the young woman who was running it said, at the end, really, you were incredible today. You went above and beyond. It's so impressive. Where did you get that from? And I said, I was an actor when I was a child, which I feel like makes me personable and makes me unafraid to approach people and all that. But that really, I spent a lot of time in the hospitality industry, mostly working for Clyde's for a number of years. I'd come back from college every year and go right back to work as a host. They'd give me shifts, and I really appreciated them for that. But, I was just like, I really got a lot from them. She said, yeah, my husband works for Clyde's. And I sort of said, well, that's interesting, but it's a big corporation. Everybody's husband works for Clyde's. She said, in some roundabout way, and she said, well, yeah, but my husband Dave Moran is the GM of the Old Ebbitt Grill, and he's going to be running the Hamilton. I was like, oh my God, hi, it's nice to meet you. And so I gave her my card, and I really all I wanted to do was be a sound engineer there, be another feather in my cap and a place that I could call a freelance home as an engineer. And it took 8 months, but finally I got a call to be interviewed as the production manager. And it turned out I knew a lot of people.
What does it mean to be a production manager for those who are?
Whew. Yeah, I mean, just as long as you don't want to have any, relationships or, too much.
What?
Yeah, no, just
Okay.
send that over. For the first 5 years, plan on not seeing a significant other. And, just, I mean, like, it's a commitment. It's 100 hours plus a week. Really
Wow.
just, wrapping your head around all these details, keeping a cool head about when they change, and
So you're dealing with the logistics when a band's coming in?
right. So we book a show, and
Mm-hmm.
I luckily don't have to do too much in that regard. First, we were booked out of Austin by a group called C3 Presents,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a big organization that gave us a lot of clout and let us, totally get big acts that shouldn't have been coming to our room as a new room. But they said, well, if C3's repping you, then we'll give you the benefit of the doubt. And they loved it, and the crowd loved it. And we really got a really auspicious start for, 5 years in as a restaurant and a music venue. And so I would get the advance, I'd get the contract, I'd reach out to their advance person, I'd tell them all about what we do and how it was going to be an amazing experience, that they were going to get world-class food, they were going to get a world-class, sound system and lighting system, and really positive can-do attitude from my staff. And that was important to me, was to build a staff that was Clyde's, happy, Clyde's, customer service. So I'm really proud of the staff I put together, and it's a small, tight-knit one, and we work really hard. And, I keep the gear running,
Wow.
I keep the staff scheduled, I get them paid, I make sure that we,
So you're basically running the venue and the logistics with the bands and the staff from the time the band knows that they're coming in
Mm-hmm.
to the time that they're there and they do their show and then wrapping up at the end of the night. That's Danny
that's me, and unlike
and the team.
And unlike a lot of production managers, I came from an audio background, so I wanted to be hands-on. I wanted to be running the show. If they didn't have an engineer, I wanted to be the engineer. I wanted to mix them. So that meant that every day at a certain time, I had to drop my office work and jump into the show, push their gear in, set it up, work with them to make the show as good as possible, and see them through all the way till they're, pulling away from the dock at the end of the night.
Now with 100 hours a week, so what's life like for you outside of the Hamilton?
I sleep.
Okay.
I watch some television,
Uh-huh.
and I, keep only snacks in the house. I get fed there twice a day, and it's unbelievable food, and it's, delicious, but it's also restaurant food that comes with, all the fixings of a sort of, delicious and not necessarily nutritious
Right.
diet, and it's all over the
Together.
map. And I,
Uh-huh.
I try to keep it. I have different things just to keep me interested in the menu, and so
Sure.
I put on weight that first couple of years, and I couldn't find enough time in my 14 hours on my feet every day to want to go to the gym and work it off. And so it was a lot of work, and I would come home and just collapse. And for a little while, I was dating somebody and living with them, and they would, they'd be asleep when I got home. I'd try to get myself out of bed just to spend a few minutes with them before they'd leave in the morning. And it was tough. It was very challenging.
Well, and you're looking trim, so have you figured out the gym thing?
Trying to
And the eating thing.
yeah,
obviously.
it's just about managing your time and your diet and sticking to the healthy items on the menu and stuff like that. So
Now, what about the funniest moment that comes to mind when you think about the Hamilton since you started there?
oh man, some of them have been, just rolling around with my bosses who are great guys who love music, who take me to concerts, who, hang with me. They really, are buddies, and they love, I get texts and calls at all hours of the day and night being like, hey man, did you hear about this? This is so exciting. And so I really love those moments. I don't know, funny maybe. I don't know if I have time to stop and laugh at things, because when I do stop, I'm just sort of blown away by what I'm getting a chance to do. I feel very, very privileged. And we've had unbelievable artists through, and we've unfortunately, not to go on a complete other direction, but in this year, this awful 2016 of losing artists, we've lost this year and last some great artists who came through my doors and played my stage and made me feel like I was, you know, the coolest guy in the world for getting to have them and interact with them. Leon Russell, Alan Toussaint, Michael Burks. You know, there's some really, really great musicians who played the stage and came multiple times and are no longer with us, and I cherish the experience.
Do they? You've talked about these big names, so then what about a biggest success moment that comes to mind?
Biggest success moment in the last 2 months. I feel truly privileged, and I'm getting away from DC musicians here, but you know, in the last 2 months, we've had private events and public events come through the room, and surprisingly not had those artists carry a front of house engineer, meaning they were leaving it up to us to put whoever we thought best on the board.
Wow.
So I've mixed Emmylou Harris, The English Beat, Hot Tuna, which is Yorma and Jack from Jefferson Airplane, also DC. Those are DC cats. They grew
Holy
up and
smokes.
born and raised here. This past week was Marilyn McCoo and Billy Davis Jr., the couple that fronted the Fifth Dimension, sang Age of
Wow.
Aquarius and, you know, all those songs. And then who's the last one? Oh, and Dave Matthews, I should mention.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. And that definitely a name that most of the folks listening definitely know. That
Yeah.
one. And so you've gotten to mix them and be the
In
handle
fact,
their-
with
their
Dave,
show.
his guy came in, brought their own board, mixed Dave's guitar and vocal, and then fed me his you know, main outs into my board so I could mix it in with a band when Dave jammed with this large, you know, this 5-piece Cuban band that he'd brought up. It was
Wow.
really, really cool.
What a cool thing.
It was, you know, I just,
Good God.
and every day I feel very privileged to be the type of person who stops and steps back from, you know, the rush of a day and says, like, this is really cool. Like, I hope that in 60 years I can remember doing this, because this is really cool.
With what you're doing, do you have any rules that you always break?
Rules I always break. Well, you know, I think there's not just one, but I always come at it from a production standpoint of the show must go on. And, like, you know, where a lot of people want to stand on their principles or on the rules that you've set out as a company or as a venue, when that's getting in the way of doing good work or keeping an artist happy, I'm like, forget it. Just get out of the way. I'll do it myself. Don't worry. And so, you know, I'm an advocate for the artists, and I think that's often misunderstood as not caring about the people who I work with or who work with, you know, my coworkers, but that's not really it.
So is this like if the artist wants something, you give it to them?
If they want, yeah, you know, whatever it takes. If my, you know, if we don't have it in house, I'll send my guys out for it. I want the artist to leave with a smile on their face, being like, already this is the nicest room with the nicest staff and the nicest gear and the nicest dinner, but they still went out of their way to do us a favor, to, you know, make it happen for me, and I'm going to tell everybody about it. And even the artists who don't draw very well and I'm not sure that we'll be able to have back, you know, I'm worried. I worry I'll never see them again in my room. I treat them extra nice. I go, you know, I'm like, whatever you guys want, let's do it. So, like, you know,
make it an amazing experience. Now, what about you as a musician? Because I know you also play tunes. So talk a little bit about that.
As a musician, so, you know, unfortunately, the beginning of the Hamilton spelled sort of the end of my playing career for the moment.
Got it.
Fridays and Saturdays were not my own, 100 hours a week, all that stuff. And you probably appreciate it as a drummer. I don't know, you know, how much franchise your band has let you buy into. But, you know, if you're a side man, which a lot of drummers and rhythm players are, you know, you're just a hired gun. And once you're not available, they have to find somebody. And
So you're a drummer and other instruments too. Drummer's your main?
drums my main, guitar and bass and piano and ukulele and a little bit of everything else. You know, I love picking up an instrument, but I wouldn't call myself anything but a drummer and maybe a little bit of a guitar player. But
How far back does that go? Where did that start?
I started playing piano when I was 5, taking music lessons pretty shortly after my dad put some. My dad's, I think one of your questions is about the first music I ever heard or my earliest
first memory. Yeah,
To
tell us
tie
that.
that in, you know, my dad put a mixtape of doo-wop and 50s and that kind of stuff in front of me, and when I wore that cassette tape out, he gave me one of 60s and, you know, rock and roll. And when I wore that out, he gave me Please Please Me, the very first Beatles record that was released in the States. And I used to go to the library at school and look it up in a book. This is for people who are old enough to remember not using the internet. And I come home and I'd be like, Dad, the next record they made was called A Hard Day's Night. And he'd be like, all right. So he'd go to Circuit City on his way home from teaching at Montgomery College and pick it up and bring it home. And by the time I was 6, I had every Beatles record. And that's my musical
amazing.
bed. And I think everybody deserves to have the Beatles as their, foundation. I know there's a lot of argument about whether the Beatles are as significant as they're claimed to be, but I believe they are. I really think so.
Now, the last question that I love to ask is if you have one piece of advice that you would offer.
That I would offer to other people out there.
However you want to answer it. That's good. What's one piece of advice that you would offer to the listeners?
To the listeners, never close yourself off to new music. Don't think that you live in one genre or that your musical tastes are limited. Let other stuff in, let it wash over you. Maybe you won't connect with it, but like the fact that lyrically and musically there is so much to be offered in the music scene in DC specifically and all over. And what I love about DC is very few people I know move here to become a musician. You're either from here or you happened here after school or something, but the music scene is very supportive of each other and very inclusive. And, I played with a ton of artists in DC and everybody would show up at each other's gigs at the small clubs at IOTA, which were sitting just across the street from that I used to work at. And that's where I met a lot of these artists for the first time and where a lot of them said, man, you're a drummer? They hadn't even heard me, but they had me out to rehearse and, slowly we became friends and bandmates.
That's cool.
So it was great.